profession when there's no
Well, I
crowd.
suppose we can kind of get started. It is 9 o'clock, and if some of the stragglers come in, I'll just back up a little bit. But anyway, glad you can make it. My name is Mark Lamore. I am the key account representative here at ACEC for all irrigation, commercial, large power accounts. So I'll be your main point of contact. And we always like to start our meetings all here at the utility with a safety message. And if you didn't grab it on the way in, you have a folder. Haley was able to put a utility color code in there. These color codes, if you never really, I know many years, I have never paid attention to it, but you see all of the location, the locate flags are color coded. And here is just basically a chart explaining what each color represents. And so when you guys do any excavating in the field, you get your locates and you see your flags, this tells you in detail what each one of those locate flags mean and what it is underneath the ground. So white is always proposed. So when you see ACEC proposed flags, you're going to see them in white. And so that's just a quick little safety. So as I mentioned, I'm Mark Lamore. A quick little intro. You're going to see a lot of the folks here, the gals. These are the folks, these are the ACEC team members that answer the phone when you call in. So there's a heartbeat, there's a face behind these calls, and they have a tough job. So I defend them every day because they have to know a lot about all subjects, and it's challenging. And when we get into irrigation specific, we have a lot of rate questions, we have a lot of CP rate questions, we have advised control times, and those are hard subjects to understand. We're going to get into them today. But they've been able to sit in here too, that way they can kind of have a great takeaway from the meeting. Along with that is John Connon. He is our standing CEO right now, general manager. John West, he is our last one. He's on his way into retirement, so congratulate him. And then Liz, she's our financial manager. Mindy, she is our member service manager. And Angela, she is our meter tech and IT manager, director. So they've got tough roles. They oversee, they're responsible for managing all directions in this cooperative underneath the direction of the board of directors. So let's kind of jump in. I want to give you a little bit of background about myself. Last year, the gentleman that was in this role, his name was Jeremy. Most of you folks have worked with Jeremy. He's moved on in a different direction, so he's no longer employed here. I came from the field as an electrical contractor 10 years ago into ACEC as a staking tech, and then I drifted into the engineering department. So I was distribution engineering here at ACEC for years. And then last year the role was changed a little bit. We added a few different responsibilities, redirected a few things, and I took on a lot of the responsibilities that Jeremy did with you. So I'm your key contact, and my contact information is in your folders too. So today we're going to get into all of these subjects, and we're ultimately going to work our way into the rates, or today's rates, what yesterday's rates were, last year's, how they apply, what you can expect on your bill specifically, what each category means, what those decisions are driven from, and we're going to work our way right into it. Please ask questions. Whatever you have, comments, please be free to interrupt me and just ask them, pitch them out there. So each year we have in our budget a certain amount of money that we set aside to upgrade facilities. So there's a depreciated value on every wire, every transformer, every piece of equipment that we have on our system, and it gets old. It gets outdated, and we just have to upgrade it. Every year we have those set apart. I kind of oversee those. I work with many of you and already have and am this year with some projects that we're doing. If it's old primary cable that's faulting, or maybe pad mount equipment that's rotted out, we work to try and reduce those potentials for faults, increase system reliability. When we do that, we have established demarcation points. So years ago, when ACEC, before the merger, we have the old Washera Electric, some of those systems over there we've installed these Burmeister cabinets. I don't know, you guys seen these old green Burmeister metering cabinets? You may have some on your system yet. Those cabinets were installed and owned by ACEC. And many times, we even installed our own secondary, long 1,200 foot-ish secondary runs out to the pivot. As all of the systems advance and change, we've had power quality issues, voltage drop issues, they faulted, and so we know we've learned a lot that they just basically weren't sustaining the need that you guys had anymore. So we budgeted and replaced a lot of those with primary cable, and we'll put a polyphase cabinet at the pivot, and we just budget for those. Along with that, though, there was a few challenges. We have to have an established demarcation point where we transfer ownership of what we're holding responsible and where our ANSI standard voltage is and where it isn't, and that's the meter socket. And just like on your house, the meter socket itself is equipment that you own and have your electrician install. We have moved years ago into that same direction with irrigation. So right now, if you have a brand new well that you guys want to put in, you have your contractor purchase, install, inspect meter sockets, and all of the equipment to disconnect and everything after that. If it's single phase, it might be a VFD. Then we run our secondary, and that demarcation point is that meter. That's where the ownership is transferred. In the case with systems that were installed 30, 40 years ago, those Burmeister cabinets, we really didn't feel that it was a fair thing to make you guys purchase all those meter sockets. So as an incentive right now, and I know you guys have one in Heartland, and maybe a few of the other guys have received them in the past, where we have a meter socket incentive, where we'll gift you that meter socket. But what we do is when that's installed, inspected, and energized, we transfer that ownership. You maintain the ownership after that point when that job is energized and closed on our end. So that's kind of an incentive that we have right now. We hope we can keep it going. Kind of much of today's discussion revolves around increased rates and cost of service. So we all know what happened 4 years ago with material. The material just went crazy. You can't find it, and if you do find it, you're paying triple the cost. Meter sockets were not excluded from that, so it's hard to find these meter sockets. They're expensive. Angela's done a great job of trying to get them. Well, she has gotten them, and we have them, but we have to be selective on when we offer those as an incentive. We do not sell them. So that's the demarcation point. That's important to remember. Construction costs, we kind of talked about the material a little bit, the cost of construction, the cost of groceries, everything has just went up quite a bit. Our labor, our trucks, cost of generation, cost of transmission, distribution, everything has gone up. So along with that, when you guys have new systems or remove and relocates, if you need to adjust something, we charge time and material. The paperwork that I kind of work with you guys to get, we have a site plan, load checklist, sometimes an application if it's new service. And this is just an example of a site plan that we ask for. It doesn't have to be detail measurements. Many times I'll work with you guys and have an aerial image and we try and draw arrows, because what our design team and our pricing team internally looks like is these guys will go out there and they'll have maybe a stake or something in the ground marking that meter socket if it's not installed yet. And they have GPS coordinates that they set with the software. It's called MapWise staking software. And they drop these and they pick that material. So when these costs are calculated, the software basically has, it's kind of like if you've had a transmission changed in your truck, it's flat rate. The auto shops have flat rates. So that's basically, in a sense, what we have. That material is generated and picked in detail, and it spits out that cost for that material, and then we apply our labor factors. So we've reduced the amount of swag that we used to have, and it's quite detailed. So the detailed information that we request from you guys, this is just an example of anything that you're doing in the future. That's pretty much the construction part of it as far as getting into any work that you guys are doing in the field. So if you have any questions with that, I know it's kind of more of an intro. SmartHub. have you guys, and do you guys use SmartHub? I know it's been out there for a while, but not a lot of people use it. And I see one head nod. So SmartHub's a useful tool. I'm not going to go in and do a full demonstration of it, but you have some pamphlets inside your folders regarding SmartHub. SmartHub basically gets you guys inside your meter data and your account for billing, all of your usage, and your notifications for peak alerts. It's the one thing that you guys can go into and access your account information whenever you want. And it's a fantastic tool. I continue learning on it also. This is a flyer. There's 2 sheets. You have this in your folder, basically giving you some of the tools and overview of what SmartHub offers. One of the main things that I wanted to talk about with SmartHub today is your notifications. Now, I don't have it on my slide, but you have a flyer in there telling you how to manage your notifications on SmartHub. Haley, I wanted to kind of throw a plug in for Haley. She's our marketing coordinator. She puts this stuff together and she's fantastic with it, making sure these tools are online for you guys and making sure everything's kind of easy to use, simple as that. SmartHub notifications, you can do it through your desktop, and on one side of the paper shows you the instructions on how to get there through your desktop, and the other side is through your smartphone. This is where you guys edit your information with emails or phone numbers for the text alerts, for the alerts for the peak advisors. If you've got team members that you want to have it or not have it, this is how you do that. With our rates, it's important that you have that updated, because if you don't get the peak alert, you're not going to know when to run or when to avoid that run time. And so it's important. If you struggle with this, when you get there in your office later or tomorrow, give me a call. I'll be able to walk through it with you. But this is important that you guys do that. Any questions on that? Peak alert. This one's interesting, very, very interesting. It took me a lot to learn. It's crazy. A lot of this is us receiving the same type of information that you receive, but it's different. Because remember, we're a cooperative, a distribution cooperative, which means our power is purchased from Alliant Energy. Alliant Energy does the same thing to us that we do to you with peak alerts. And so Lori and Danielle, one of their roles in dispatch is to receive an email every day from Alliant Energy. It's about 9 o'clock, 9:30, somewhere around
9:28.
9:28. Their advisory emails that they get from Alliant comes from Iowa.
Yes.
And so along with those peak alerts, they get something down the same exact line that you guys get. Advise peak alert between XYZ hours. And there's some forecasts in there with weather, but it's in Iowa. That's the information we get. And so John, a few years ago, we have a few tools that we use to try and narrow this down the best that we can for you guys. One of them is weather. It's in Iowa. We look at weather. There's a standard deviation form that they use as a tool to kind of help guide historical information with today's information. What does that look like? And basically, think of it this way. If Alliant does, for example, peak at 5 o'clock, and we only advise from 2 to 4, you guys are going to get that CP rate on your bill. You're going to get billed for it. And the first phone call that you're going to make is to me and say, but you only advised 2 to 4. We missed it. And so the work that these two do, it's critically important that they're accurate to the best that they can. And they build those in, so when we advise these times to you, you're covered. We've advised those times. Now you guys have decisions to make when those times get to you. You roll the dice. We used to have load controls where we basically controlled it and said you're not going to run. But that's changed. You have that choice now, but you're the one rolling the dice. Some growers decide that they don't want to do it, and they burn right through it, and they take that risk, and they have to pay for it. That's your call. the information that they get, they do their best with it and they kick those alerts out. And it's hard, in the summer it's a little more easier to project, maybe in the winter, but those shoulder months in the spring, fall, those are challenging because they're always moving. There's just a constant target, they're always moving. So that's one of the things that they do, and it's hard to do. So SmartHub is where those notifications are. We text them, we email them, make sure that your notifications are up to date in SmartHub. It's critical that you get that information. Any questions on that? They're in here, they came in because they wanted to kind of see a little bit about what we talk about, but they're just a lot better resource than I am on some of the intricate details of what they have to do. So if you have questions, they're here. This is a great opportunity if you do. Along with Peak Alert, on our website, we have all of the Peak Alert history posted on our website. I want to show you, and I'm going to change over to our website real quick and show you where this is. So this is our homepage on our website.
Mark, it didn't flip over.
You have to stop your PowerPoint.
Gotcha. So on our website, irrigation, if you just hit the irrigation, that's who you guys are, your irrigators. You're going to be able to go down and just scroll. This is your page. This is designed for you guys. You can get started. All of our forms are in our PDFs. It shows you where everything is. But on the bottom, it has Peak Alert history. And so all of our history is right here. And we go back a couple years. And so every advised time that we kick out is posted right here. So let's just go back to the summer months. Let's say June 1st, we advised from 1 to 7 p.m. And you can see these are all of the times in June that we advised. But those advised times don't guarantee anything. We don't know exactly when it's going to hit until the end of the month. We gamble the same as you guys gamble. At the end of the month, it was determined that the hour ending at 6 p.m. was our peak on June 29th. So you can see that on June 29th, Lori and Danielle advised 3 to 7 p.m. It peaked at the hour ending 6 p.m. So if you guys were running during that hour, you would have been billed that CP rate. And we're going to get into that in a few more slides on what that looks like. That's how that works. And so this is a good history to help you guys if you're wanting to water during that advised time. This is good historical data to kind of show you on how it hit. It's kind of a good useful link. I want to close out my PowerPoint, so I'm going to reopen here quick. That's basically it on CP. We're going to start getting into the rates a little bit. So any questions on that? ACEC subcontracts out. We basically hire out to an engineering firm. Right now they're out of Madison, Power Systems Engineering. What they do is they basically analyze all of our rates, our costs, our income, our expenses, all across the board. There's no categories exempt from this. Every penny that goes out, and Liz will be able to speak a little bit more if you have some specific questions. Every dollar that goes out is categorized and expensed in different codes of exactly what category they go to. If it's labor, if it's trucks, if it's purchase power, what are the buildings, every dollar that goes out has a place. And every dollar that comes in kind of has a place too. Power Systems Engineering analyzes this data, historical data. They're doing it today and they're going to be doing it next year too. And they basically have a cost of service study. They look at every red cent, every penny, and they say, okay, this is our rates, this is what we bring in, this is where the money's going out, what do we have to do? Do we have to change, and if so, what do we change, and how do we change it, and how much? That advice comes to us from the cost of service study. Our management team analyzes it, they look at it, and so does our board of directors. And they propose cost increases if necessary, or they propose, just keep it the same, whatever those adjustments need to be made. That happened, and that generated some cost increases. Then we're going to talk about those. We're going to talk about exactly how that affected you guys on irrigation. So that's what's kind of driving some of this, along with, remember that we're a distribution cooperative. We purchase power from Alliant Energy. So from Watoma, you guys drive around Watoma, what have you guys seen the last 2 years in Watoma go up? It's a crazy amount of it over there.
Solar.
It's all solar. Hundreds of acres of solar. Alliant Energy owned and installed all of that solar. There's an expense behind it, a huge expense behind it. So what did Alliant do to pay for it? They had to raise your rates. Now remember, Alliant is an IOU, they're investor-owned utility. They operate underneath the Public Service Commission. There isn't anything that they can really do with their rates unless they have approval from Public Service Commission. There's a lot of details in here that I'm not prepared to speak on exactly, but they have to get that approval from the Public Service Commission. So when they increase the rates, it's not to just their customers, but it's to their wholesalers also, and that's us, that's you and me. Well, us ultimately. And then we had to pass that rate along to you guys in response to it, and that's where the cost of service study comes in. So that includes generation, that includes all of the transmission costs, that includes all of the distribution, which is pretty much on our end, and then the households, or basically the meter, the secondaries, all of that. That includes all of the whole subject of what those costs look like. What I'm going to do is I'm going to give you guys a quick brief overview of what I'm about to cover, because it's going to get into the details of the rates and how they apply. And I know you may have some specific questions. I'm just going to give you a brief overview, because it's quite likely I'm going to answer your questions before you'll even ask them. But in the event that I don't, please speak up. Please ask the questions. And we're also going to be publishing this meeting and this PowerPoint, some of these details online. So we will have this information accessible for you guys, for other team members too that may not have been able to make it. So we have 2 irrigation rate classes right now. You've got your CP rate and you have your time of day. Is there anybody in this room right now that's on the time of day rate? Do you have any meters on time of day? We're still going to talk about it for the sake of the recording though. This is the big one, CP rates. Our current class in 2024, and then in the next slide I have comparisons from 23, and then I have actual bills that I pulled with actual examples to see how they actually apply to the bill. We're going to go through that, and we're also going to go through the time of use rates, the same type of structure. We've got side-by-side comparisons, 23 to 24, to see what these exact impacts are. We're going to discuss the different types of the peak demands, what they cover, and how they calculate out. So, to the best that I was able, in this first example, I used a 100 horsepower well that's pumping 1,100 gallons per minute. That was my example. We were able to go to a well. I have an account that I actually used and pulled this and used this. I've gotten rid of all of the personal information for this comparison. There's a few points with this that we're going to talk about quick before we get into the comparisons. First of all, the facility charge, it went up $5 a month. It was $85 a month, it went up to $90 a month. The energy charge, which is basically your energy, your kilowatt hours, did not change. So that's still 3.9 cents per kilowatt hour. Your distribution demand charge, which is your standard demand charge, went up from $6.50 to $7.50. So that was a $1 increase per kW. And And then your coincident peak demand, which is that 1 hour we talked about, went up to $38.58. That is a change from $33.60, so approximately $5 per kW. The other thing that we have is we used to have 6-month billing. It is now 12-month. That's 24/7. So we no longer can do holidays and weekends. We will be advising on all holidays and weekends. And I know that one's kind of a pain point, and I understand. That's why the alerts are very important to make sure they're updated. But we literally missed $1,100,000 last year by not having 12 months. And so we had to subsidize those expenses with other categories. And so we have to go to the 12-month. I've had some feedback already on this, but we had to do it. So we're going to get into the comparisons. Is there any questions right now before we move on? The comparison, again, is 100 horsepower, 1,100 gallons per minute. So you can see that this example includes CP. So this example, this billing example, this member ran through CP. And it gives a good example of how much that can cost if you don't pay attention to the peak alerts. So first of all, it went from, you can see the comparisons, and it's the same demand and the same kilowatt hour in this example. So you can see that the total went from 33.27 up to 37.27. So at 27,000 kilowatt hours, there's no change because the energy charge, the kilowatt hours did not change. It's still 3.9 cents. The peak demand charge did go up. So if you run through CP, it went from 33.60 to 38.58. You can see that went up approximately a little over $300. So that's how that increase would change, is if you guys ran through CP. The demand charge, we have a $1 increase. So this particular well ran and hit 69.7 kW. So you can see that increase went up about $75, give or take, and some change. The power cost adjustment, literally, there's no change between the years on that. So that power cost adjustment comes in as Alliant moves with their expenses. That's just the power cost on every month. So overall, the calculation in this example from last year to this year, with this example, you can see that again, it went up about $400. That's if you run through CP. Now I've got two actual bill examples to kind of, and the bill examples use the same kilowatt hour, the same kilowatts in each one. So this is what the bill would look like and represent what you see on this slide. So the bill structure basically on the left reports the previous and the current kilowatt hours, and then it does the math. That's how the meter reads. And then it reports the kilowatts with A and the B. So the A and the B is basically your on and your off peak demand. So when you look at this, that calculates when and how we're applying those demands. And Haley has that on the printout. It's in she's got an example in your folder. And then we have that online too to make sure that you guys understand that. And then on the right side of the bill, you can go down and see the itemized calculations for each of the rates. So there's your facility charge. I don't have a pointer. You've got your facility charge and you've got your energy. So your 3.9% of your kilowatt hours is going to be calculated by your 27,000 kilowatt hours. So that calculates your $1,000 to $1,062 for your energy. Thank you, John. That's for your energy. Now, this bill example, they ran through the CP. They decided to run through the revised time, or they just ignored it, whatever the case is. Maybe notifications weren't updated, sometimes mistakes happen. But they ran through that hour. Now, quick question. Do you make sure that you understand what demand is? Do you guys get demand and what that is? Let's say Johnny over here goes and buys a brand new Corvette. And he peels in the parking lot, and I say, man, I've never driven a Corvette. I want to drive your car. And how about $100 if I can put 100 miles on that car? And he's like, yeah, okay, great. And I jump in the car, and 8 hours later I come back, and the car's got 100 miles on it. He's like, ah, cool, that was fun, that was awesome. But what if the same scenario happens and I say, hey John, I want to borrow your car, here's $100. And an hour later I come back and the car's got 100 miles on it. It's the same amount of miles, right? Kilowatt hours, it's the same amount of energy, but I beat the snot out of his car in that 1 hour. So the depreciated value of that car increased. I just pounded on it, it's smoking. That's demand. That's how we're building demand. So when you look at that CP demand, that well hit 65 kW, which is a kilowatt. So kilowatt, what's a watt? It's just a metric measure of watts, so kilowatt. And if you do that math and divide by your voltage and your square root of 3, it gives you your ampacity. That's kind of a little side note there. But that number was 65. And so we have to multiply it by our CP demand rate, which is $38. So for that 1 hour, that's a lot of money. That's $2,500. And that's ultimately a pass-through rate that Alliant charges us for running on CP. That is a big ding. If you guys miss CP, those are big numbers. Your standard demand charge is $7.50. Just all there is to it. And I'd like to interject a little bit on ways that you can reduce that number. So 69 kW, $7.50. This bill has $523 of demand charge on it. And then power cost adjustment. So it's $3,700 on this bill. And if you do the same exact numbers, they're the same usage, it's the same demand, but they avoided the CP. They missed and they did not run during the CP advised time. You can see their bill is only $1,200. So that's not so ugly. I mean, it's still a lot of money, I get it, but it's not $3,700 ugly. So that CP, that 1 hour, is a big deal. It's a big deal. And so I get the question sometimes on how you can reduce this demand in water. Now, I can't speak from a volume and a water supply standpoint. I'm not an irrigation tech, but what I can do is talk a little bit on some of the tools that you can use to reduce the demand on an electric motor, knowing that the rate of flow will be affected. And I don't have the math on how that rate of flow, what that looks like. But if you take any electric motor, for example, a 100 horse well motor, and you start at locked rotor, that means you hit the button and it throws 480 on that thing from a dead stop and it ramps up. It takes a little bit for that thing to get going, right? What happens to the KW? What happens to the inrush currents of that motor as it's trying to start? They're freaking skyrocket high, right? And so how can you control that? How do you guys control that? What do you guys sometimes have on your systems? You see it on most of the single phase. You have VFDs. So the VFD is a variable freak drive. Those offer tools like soft start options. You can program those drives to start slowly over a 3 to 5 minute period of time. That way when you push a button, you're not throwing it right to the wood right away. It comes up slow. ultimately what happens is that demand charge, that demand calculation, in theory, it's gonna go down. You're gonna reduce that number, giving you a savings. Those are tools that you guys have sometimes. All of your single phase options, if you have any, is gonna have, we require a VFD on single phase. Some of you guys on your 3-phase have VFDs. Contact your irrigation techs and look at the software options for the programming options of that VFD. Make sure you're using them appropriately, because it literally can give you a savings. So if you have a 100 horsepower well, depending on your rate, you might be able to shave the frequency down on that a little bit. It's going to reduce your rate, but it's also going to reduce your demand. And so those are studies that can be done by your irrigation tech. And don't be afraid to tag me in those discussions if they're coming up. Like, we can work together and kind of make a case-by-case study and kind of look at that for you guys. Any questions on the CP rate? Anything you guys, team, you guys want to add to that I might have missed? Yeah.
So as an example then, so say you're running your system dry, or whatever, spraying in the middle of the day, and say you're moving your system dry for 30 minutes, and you happen to be in all that 30 minutes is in that peak time. How much more did it just cost you to move that system dry for 30 minutes than if you didn't hit that peak time?
I would have to do the math and look at that, but it's going to be a direct result of what that KW is. So if you're not pumping water, let's say the well pump is not running, but you just moved your system. So that being said, what is I'm going to suggest less than 10 kW. So I don't have the data to back that up. I'm just going off of my gut when I say that. So less than 10 kW, and the reason I'm coming up with that number is when we kick out the calculated well reports every year, you guys got those, right? We use 10 kW as a guideline. 10 kW and less suggests that you just moved the system and didn't pump water, because there's little usage there. But it's still demand. We don't know that any different. So we still have to, this peak demand and the demand charge is there for demand. It's not there for the driven purpose of pumping water. So it still applies. So if you move your system and you hit 10 kW in that 1 hour, then we're going to take 10 kW. Wow, I have to go back a slide. We're going to take 10 kW and we're going to multiply it by 3858, so that'll be $380. That's what that would look like. For an example, I don't know exactly what your system would pull on demand for moving it.
Now, the one thing with moving a system, I don't know how long it takes, a half hour, 40 minutes,
Whatever. Yeah.
or even if, let's say it's an hour. The best thing to do, demand is measured from the top of the hour to around the hour, right? So if it's going to take you an hour to move the system, the best way to do it is move it on the half hour to the half hour. Because it's not going to measure the whole hour, it's only going to measure half that time. So you can reduce half your bill on that.
Yes.
Yeah.
Thanks, John.
And that's the one thing on max demand. Max demand measurement is changing, correct? Where it's not the 15 minutes times 4.
It's adding.
It's adding up.
It's going to
Right.
add them instead of times it.
Right. So the max demand this year in last year, 2023, was your highest 15 times 4. And now that's going to change too, and it's going to be adding up. So if you were flushing your system in the spring and you were running for 15 minutes, and that 15 minutes was measured 10 kW, before you would have gotten billed before, if you would have billed for that, you would have gotten billed 10 times 4, which would have been 40 kW. And now the max demand is only going to be billed for that 10. it's gonna add up. So if you're only running 15 minutes, it's not 10 times 4, it's just 10. So the only way you get billed to 40 is if you ran 10 kW all for 15-minute intervals. So that should help reduce some of those max demand charges in the non-summer months when you're running and you're just moving the systems or something like that. But the coincident demand, yeah, if you're running during that coincident peak hour, Alliance measuring that, we're getting billed for that, 10 kW or whatever it is that you're using up to that. So 10 kW if you ran and it was for the whole hour, we're gonna see just on Alliance side, $280 on that charge that we get billed.
And some systems in that shoulder month, like he's talking about on the irrigation reports, are literally 0.36. Some are 3 kW, some are 7 kW. I don't know what those people are doing in that month, so we can't say exactly what it would pull for that energy, is what Mark's trying to allude to. That's why, in general, that under 10 kW would be what you'd see if you were just moving the system, for instance, like that. But it's pulling 15-minute increments. And so our system, if you're running across those 15-minute increments, he's saying if you run from 9:30 to 10, you'd only hit 2 of those increments. If you're starting at 9:16 and you're running till 9:50, you're going to have increments or usage in those 15-minute increments across that hour period. So it's going and taking all of that together. He's saying try to run it in blocks because it's literally measuring at the 0 hour being 9 o'clock. It's running at 9:15, it's pulling that data, it's pulling it at 9:30, 9:45, and 10 o'clock. So all those 15-minute increments are adding up for the total that you're seeing, and therefore that hour or the total.
But if you run it outside of the peak, 15-minute increments don't even matter.
It still measures, but you would not have that peak demand charge at all. So when we're sending out that peak alert saying between 1 and 3 don't run, move your pivot any other time between 1 and 3 and you won't see that peak demand charge. It'll factor into your total max demand charge. You'll never avoid that for the month
But it'll
though.
be minimal, so if you take, you're splitting hairs at that point in time. So if you're outside of the CP and you're gonna run for a short bit and maybe you only hit 8 or 10 kW, which I still think maybe even high. I see that shaking, I think that's high, but I'd rather err on that side and tell you, so if you take 750 times 10, you need $75. Well, I think 10 is still high, and I think if you only run like Liz is saying, outside of it, now all of a sudden the cost to move that system, you're looking at probably $30, $40, something like that, and now it's probably justified for you guys to be able to move it. But if you run inside this peak hour, if the stars line up and we peak, if we knew the answer, we would tell you. Our business would look entirely different. We want to know that number too, but we just don't know any more than you do. But if those stars line up, it doesn't matter what you're running. We've got to apply that multiplier on it and bill for it.
So if you run your system during the month and don't water, you're still gonna get a demand charge, 750 times, it'll be like times 8 or 10.
Yes, sir.
But if you start your well one time, you'll get that full demand charge.
The peak demand charge, only if you hit it during.
No, the demand charge.
The demand charge.
Demand charge.
The
is
750, the
Yes.
750, yeah.
Yep.
Anytime
Start
you
your
run
well,
it.
so if you flush your well for 15 minutes in May and don't run it any other time, you're still gonna pay $523.
Well, it'd only be your 10 times that 750,
Yeah.
potentially. So it would be much less than that.
Yeah.
If you're pumping, different story. If you're moving versus pumping is gonna have that higher KW, moving is gonna have the lower KW. But you would be charged the 750 times whatever that usage is in that month, yes.
Right.
So how much is that if you pump like for 15 minutes, you're doing a flush?
It's gonna be probably only 1/4 of that, because it's only 15 minutes.
It's 15 minutes.
That demand charge there of 69 is probably not measured now there. Because you can see that the peak up charge up above is 65 kW also. So that's probably an hour. So now flushing, and that's why I wanted to change it, because there are so many people that flush it. And, we should be able to reduce that flush charge down by 75% it should be. And that's why I say, if you're gonna do it, try to do it coming up to the beginning of the hour. You know, if it takes more than 15 minutes, you better do it at 8:45 till 9:15, right? Because then it's only gonna be 15 minutes on this side and 15 on the other side.
Be about
It's not gonna be a half hour.
Be about
right?
$131.
Yeah.
If I did the math with using those numbers as a baseline, 15 minutes would be about $131. Demand charge, if you're flushing. All right, we're gonna get into time of use. Doesn't sound like you guys have any meters on this rate. If you would like to, I mean, you're free to do that, but it would really not be a good fit for you guys, it doesn't sound like. So kind of the same principle in the presentation. We're gonna talk about what we have, the comparisons, and then a couple examples. So this is the time of use. There is no CP advised times on this. You don't get that advisory. What we have every day on this rate is every day between the hours of 1 to 7, well, Monday through Friday. This one is exempt from the weekends. Between 1 and 7, you acquire a $24.50 peak demand charge. Your normal distribution demand charge is the same as the other rate, as well as your facility and energy. So this one basically has that 1 to 7 p.m. slot where you guys are avoiding those times every day. Where your CP, you have a lesser demand charge for $7.50 when we don't advise. So that, I hope I said that okay for you guys. Maybe I tripped on my own words here. We're gonna get into a little bit here. So the facility charge went up $5, just like your other rate did. Your energy is still 3.9 on this rate, so no change there either. Your peak demand during the 1 to 7 p.m., we did not increase that. That's still $24.50. Your regular demand went up the dollar as the CP rate did. That's the increase that you see here, and then the power cost adjustment reflects the same as the other rate. So the difference here, if you have this rate, the comparison between 2023 and 24 literally went up less than $100. So that's where the difference is, though, is on the CP. You guys get the advised times and you avoid those. The nice thing is literally the only demand charge, if you avoid the CP, is that distribution demand of $7.50. These members basically have to, they're basically paying their demand of $24.50 5 days a week from 1 to 7. So you have a little more freedom on the CP, but you also have to be careful to avoid the CP times when we advise. This is the same kind of the bill example of what we just talked about. The A and B. I want to talk about the A and B. I get these calls once in a while, and I want to make sure that when these apply, the A and B kind of have the same application on the CP rate too. So it's just important to kind of recap this. You're on peak, and then you call it mid-peak. I'd like to see that changed to off-peak, but it's just a word play. So your on peak is the A. So on peak, you can see that your usage is 1226. So if you go over here, your peak, your usage is 1226 kilowatt hours. During that on peak, you had 42.9 kW. So your peak demand is 42.9 kW multiplied out. Your off peak or your mid peak, they're calling it, all of your other times, is the B. That's how we have it itemized, where the B carries over, and you can see that the 5,032 kilowatt hours is your off peak. Then your 45 kW is your off-peak demand. So that's how those are calculated. Again, we're having, Andy's doing a great job of putting these examples together. If you look at them on each of your sheets, when you get your bills, if you have questions, you're gonna have all of the explanations right next to it, so you can refer to that. And the other thing we talked about, SmartHub here a little while ago. SmartHub gives you load history. You can go into SmartHub and you can look at all these charts and do all these exports with your load history on that meter. So you can look and see the exact demands and your usage on SmartHub for each of your meters. It's helpful. Please feel free to give me a call if you have specific questions on that. I have some other internal tools that I use. I use meter data management, and then metering has some command center. Most of the command center is a tool for our meter techs to use to go in there. So I use meter data management. It gives me a lot of the same tools that you guys see through SmartHub, but I'm able to kind of split that into some different export options and zone into different some timelines. So if you have specific load questions, feel free to give me a call and I'll look up that meter and we can work together on that. So that pretty much concludes a lot of those rate changes. So feel free to give me any questions, comments that you have regarding that or any construction. If you have them. I see the mind burning back there in the corner. So thanks for coming. We appreciate it. I'll hang around for a while too, so if you have any side conversations, I'm logged in. I can look at your account. Any specific questions, we can look at some billing history on your accounts if you'd like, or any other thing that you have on your table that you want to talk about. Thanks for coming.